I want to touch on that, and I want to get your guys' opinion on this. So obviously, we know from watching the MCU that Vision dies. Okay, and there's reference to that in this series. And as we're watching this, I'm internally going, I would really love for them to resurrect Vision, and just because the chemistry of Paul Bettany and Elizabeth Olsen as these characters would be great to continue. But how to do that? And then, like, as the series is going on, before we get to this episode, I'm like, wait a minute, maybe they're not. This is just her in her head, and she's temporarily bringing him back. And now that I'm seeing the pieces of him and the reference to the comics of him actually coming back, I'm hoping that they go towards this. But I want to get your guys' thoughts. Do you want Vision to come back and come back to life, but be different, be the same? Drew, I want to start with you. What do you want?
I'm very happy with him being dead. I think this series is a nice final send off where we get to see. I mean, what we saw in the Avengers Infinity War with their nice rapport, their cool relationship, and he dies. The end of that movie, it felt really abrupt. But with this, he can still be dead and just somehow live on in the Maximoff anomaly, and this be sort of the swan song to the fans of giving them that relationship, and then really having to I don't know, acknowledge part of the grieving process is just coming to grips with reality that he is in fact dead.
Yeah. What about you, Kyle? Do you want to see him come back, either as himself or a different version, or are you happy with him, like Drew says, being dead, but we're getting this kind of final send off?
So I have mixed feelings on this because, one, I do think there's ways that are within the MCU established already to bring the Vision back. And it ties into Wakanda. Because how much information does Suri have from when she worked on the Visions, when she was trying to copy the Visions?
I hadn't even thought about that.
Thought process.
Hold on. You just blew Drew's mind.
I didn't even think about that. Wow.
So we have that possibility. We have a lot of things that could happen with the Vision, obviously, with his body, but they also make a very big point about what his wishes were of his last will and testament, and I think that was kind of a key point as well. And let's not forget something here. And as much as we want to live in the comic book world and everything like that, there is a reality. Paul Bettany is not a spring chicken. Let's be honest here. The Vision's an android, and he doesn't age. Paul Bettany is going to continue to age. And so I think this is kind of like what the issues they had with Robert Downey Jr. and stuff is, as Robert Downey Jr. gets older, it's going to be harder for him to play the same age Tony Stark. And so this is kind of where reality meets comic book movie a little bit here too. I think it could be done. I wouldn't be upset if they did it, because I think a lot more people would love to see Paul Bettany back more after this series. But on the opposite, I think on the other side of it is that does it make sense? But there's so many ways they can take this, and there's so many possibilities that they've created for themselves. Between, obviously, we have multiverse coming. We still have what I mentioned about Black Panther. There's a lot of different. They could go with just a Vision that doesn't have emotions, and that can be played by a different actor at that point. There's a lot of pathways they can go with the Vision that they don't have necessarily with other characters. So it's going to be very interesting to see it. But this is, again, Marvel being intelligent in their writing. They've given themselves comic book ways out. They've given themselves something that they've already established in their own movies as a way out. So it's one of the more interesting characters. And I think that's maybe even one of the side things they were curious about with WandaVision. Is there enough response to bring the Vision back to life?
Right. Yeah. Interesting. So you think there's a possibility they'll gauge the fan response on this? This is the good thing about the Marvel Cinematic Universe, is that they're listening to the fans, and I think this is great. And I was, from the very beginning of this series and seeing the chemistry between two actors, I was like, I hope they find a way to bring Vision back. But then I'm kind of like back on the fence again, especially after what you said, Drew, about, it's okay to him be dead, but let's flush out his character a little bit more, which also in turns flushes out Wanda's character, because obviously going forward, whether she turns to a villain temporarily or whatever, it's going to give a lot of extra depth to her as well. So, yeah.